We need to reflect with sober urgency and righteous indignation the need to support Olly Harrison's petition to delay the inheritance tax on farmers. I'm sort of fortified by a conversation I had last night with Liz Webster and Ollie Fletcher, both active farmers, and the both despairing about the laws being enacted by an urban government that has no regard and no interest in the in our food production. And if we one of the frightening things that we were talking about last night was, if there was a crisis or if our country were attacked, within days we would have no food. No, to say nothing about the vulnerability in terms of cables on which we depend, which could easily be ripped up from the seafloor. We are so vulnerable, and we have made ourselves more vulnerable by trying to rely on transatlantic or other supply routes from Morocco. Tomatoes from Morocco, when the Moroccans can barely feed themselves, and it seems unreasonable when we have tomatoes by the ton in Europe, and we haven't done the deals to access them. There is madness here. So I'm speaking not just as a commentator, but as an advocate for clarity, for consultation, for common sense. British farming is under siege, not by blight or weather, though that's not helped by climate change. Climate change brings with it disease, it brings with it uncertainty, but by bureaucracy, ignorance, and a poorly designed tax reform that threatens the very survival of family farms. So, as I say, last night I had the chance to speak to two leading rural voices, Liz Webster and Ollie Fletcher, and both are sounding the alarm. And I urge everyone listening to sign Olly Harrison's petition to halt this ill-conceived inheritance tax reform, not permanently perhaps, but at least until it can be done properly. But actually, a rethink is really necessary from April next year, because it's a knee-jerk law brought in and predicated, I think, on ignorance or jealousy or both. And from April next year, family farms worth over £1 million will for the first time face a 20% inheritance tax on agricultural assets above that threshold. Ministers claim that due to other exemptions, couples can still pass on up to £3 million in tax-free, but the reality, as any working farmer will tell you, is far more complex. This isn't tax justice, it's tax disruption, and it's being rushed through without proper consultation, without a credible impact assessment, much like the tax on private schools, and no regard for the reality on the ground. In a rare moment of parliamentary sanity, the Environment, Food and Rural Health Committee, including 7 Labour MPs, has now called for a delay until at least April 2027. They accuse the government of poor communication, last-minute decision-making, and disregard of more vulnerable farming groups, and the committee's report is damning. It warns of considerable risk of unintended consequences, including distressed sales, the fracturing of generational continuity, and the very, very real collapse of food production enterprises in our country, in already fragile rural economies. We're not talking about hedge funds in Hampshire or tax shelters in Gloucestershire. We're talking about 3 generational farms in Yorkshire, tenant holdings in Wales, small family operations across Norfolk, Cumbria, the Highlands, Lincolnshire. The government says this is to stop the super rich buying farmland to avoid inheritance tax. Fine, then target them. But don't use a sledgehammer on people whose entire livelihood is tethered to soil, stock and seasonal labour. To quote Alistair Carmichael, do it properly. Go after the super rich, but don't sacrifice family farms to a flawed policy and a rushed announcement. Liz Webster, who's long campaigned and championed farming communities, calls Plainly, this is a betrayal of rural Britain. Many farmers are older, asset-rich, but cash-poor, and a 20% tax hit means selling land, laying off workers, or simply folding altogether. What kind of country taxes the people who feed it into extinction? And the anger is already spilling into the streets. Farmers are protesting in Whitehall. Tractors are circling Parliament. And the message is simple: consult, listen, and don't destroy farms. Olly Harrison's petition is rapidly gaining momentum. He presents not just himself, but a generation of young farmers who've stayed in the industry despite Brexit, cheap imports, and the collapse of sustainable farming initiatives. If this tax goes through as planned, it will be the final blow for many. This isn't about dodging tax. It's about designing tax. There is a place for reform. There's a place for fairness, but there's no place for policy by press leak, nor for punishing those who grow our food, care for our countryside, and represent the last vestiges of continuity in a rapidly fragmenting nation. So I say from my heart, pause the policy, consult the people it affects, and legislate like grown-ups. Stop being so unbelievably childish and prejudiced. Support the EFRA committee's recommendations. Sign the petition. Defend the dignity of British farming before it's lost beneath red tape and Westminster arrogance and ignorance. In the last war, people in their thousands joined farms. They were called the Land Army. And people from towns and cities learnt about agriculture and learnt about the enormous work from dawn till dusk and through the night that farmers do every day of the year. There is no break. And in those days, people were often milking by hand. I've milked by hand, by the way. It's hard work. It's hard work. And today we are destroying this industry. The government is destroying this industry. The government, as I say, sometimes I overuse the word stupid, but this is a place where stupidity is well used. The government needs to rethink. It needs to listen to its own committee. And it needs to rethink this unbelievably short-sighted and stupid plan. And it needs to do so fast before our farms disappear from view.